the quicker that I could have gotten out of the 1 to 4 unit properties and into the larger buildings, the greater wealth I would have created, and the sooner I actually would have been out of the rat race, if you could, the Robert Kiyosaki term, right? But it's just, it's some reflection on what I've done at this point, right?
Sure. Hey guys, welcome to the Real Estate Investors Money Matrix. I am your host, Scott Ulmer, and always a privilege and pleasure to be here. With me, I got a very special guest, Quentin D'Souza. Did I say it right, by the way?
Yeah, you're good.
Fantastic. So Quentin has experienced tremendous success. He's an author of multiple books, working on his fifth one now, as he was just sharing with me, which is mind-blowing because I've written one and it took me a whole lifetime to do it. And he's already on his fifth. So, but has a really neat background and has some specializations in real estate that he's excelled in. Got some questions for him. Hopefully we can bring some great content here. And with that, Quentin, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, well, I've learned that when I try to repeat or recite somebody's biography and who they are and where they came from, I usually will shortchange it. So I've read all about you and I have it in front of me. Would you just kind of share with our listeners a little bit about your backstory, where you came from, your real estate journey and certainly where you are today?
Sir, how about I go way back. I was born in Fiji, actually, and the Fiji Islands, and we came to Canada when I was 3, so I didn't have much of a choice. And I've been interested in real estate since 2004, and so that was more of a pre-construction rental property that I didn't do anything else until it took a long time for that property. We bought it off the plans. So I didn't actually start, going hard in rental properties until I sold it. And then in 2008, I was like, man, this is really good. I should have done more of these instead of just one. And so I got into it, even though there was, the great recession that went on, financial crisis, whatever you want to call it. I found that there was opportunity for me to buy properties that cash flowed. And so I was buying 3 or 4 properties a year starting in 2008. And in about 2013, I was using a buy, fix, refinance, and rent strategy on those properties. And by 2013, I had created enough income to be able to quit my job. I was a teacher. It was actually, I worked at the school board level. So I was a consultant. I have a master's in education, and I was going to be a school principal, but I felt like the position was different than it had been in the past. It was more of a middle management position where you were being dictated by the school board as to what exactly you were to do. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wanted to focus on growing my business. So I left teaching in 2014 and have been a full-time real estate investor ever since. I flipped a dozen properties. Actually, I made more money on my first flip project than my whole year of teaching the year before. And so, yeah, it was kind of crazy, but I wish I had done it sooner, but you never know until you do it. And then in 2015, I started to do what I did in the 1 to 4 unit space in apartment buildings. So 6-unit apartment building, and then 7, then 11, 12, and I've been growing ever since. Right now I have about 80 million in assets under management and continue to grow. I feel like I'm just getting started. It sounds kind of weird, but.
What do you mean by that? Because I think I understand, but what do you mean by that?
Well, really this year I started to buy multiple apartment buildings at the same time. And I, from a mindset perspective, I did it was a $40 million acquisition, and for that doubled my portfolio in a year, right? And it really was something that I could have done years ago, but I was, it was just the sheer size of the portfolio that I had in front of me. And I did it anyways. And now I feel like I could keep doing it every year. And it was a mindset block, not necessarily, it's not that I didn't have the tools or the relationships or the team to be able to handle it. But now I've kind of rechecked what I've already done, and I've got a pipeline of another 20 million in assets that in the next, by the time March comes, or April actually now, for acquisitions. So in about 4 months, I should have another 20 million, which is great. And I felt like if I didn't do that $30 million acquisition, I wouldn't feel like these like 15 and 5 million acquisitions they're not really a big deal. Right. So, it was pure mindset. It wasn't that I didn't have the ability to do it or the team.
Well, and that is kind of interesting segue, because I was sharing before we started recording. I'm a curious guy. I'm always curious to know kind of what makes people tick when it comes to a morning routine, or reading that they like to do, books they like to recommend, and really kind of mantras that they live their life by. And so you talk about mindset, and that is, as we kind of jokingly say, Dr. Phil kind of lives in our office building. We're big on psychology, big on mindset. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? So it sounds to me like, was there a mental block, or maybe you didn't feel you were able or capable of handling the bigger numbers, or what was the block, and then what was the shift in your mindset that allowed you to kind of overcome that?
It was a couple of different things. One is I'm part of the entrepreneur organization, and I have a forum group that is full of real estate investors who are across Canada. And in that group, at 40 million in assets, I was like one of the smallest portfolio size in that group. Some of them have 200 million in assets, some of them have 300 million, and I felt like I had to step up my game to be sitting beside these guys, and that really helped me to shift a bit, knowing that I have the skills to be in that room. So I had the skills to be able to grow at the same pace. So I think that helped. Also, just being able to set challenges for myself. So every quarter I set a quarterly challenge, which takes me out of my comfort zone. And over that year, my quarterly challenges were buying bigger and bigger apartment buildings. And so as I continued to do that, I pushed myself, and from a mental perspective, to get to the size of deals that I'm doing now that I feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and it sounds like what's the old saying? Your net worth is determined by your network. And so you are in a room of folks that are have bigger portfolios than you, and you're there, and knowing you could be kind of in the same ranks as them, have the capabilities, but being around them, I suspect, served as some inspiration to see what else could be done, and how you had a lot more growth in front of you. Is that kind of an accurate way to kind of recite it back?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely made a big difference to me, and influenced me in my growth trajectory.
Fantastic. And as far as quarterly goals, so is you just set one? Is it one goal a quarter that is kind of how you do it?
No. I actually wrote a book called The Action Taker Real Estate Planner, and that actually includes all of my the setup that I use. So what I do is I do 10-year goals. Okay. And I do 3-year goals, and then I do quarterly goals. I don't do annual goals because I find that they don't work. So within my quarterly goals, and I actually have it posted up on my wall right beside me. So I have 3 focuses every quarter, and within each focus area, I have 3 main action items that I'm focusing on with for each of those. I also focus on particular to real estate investing, finding, funding, and financing properties. So I have some quarterly goals that are associated with that. I have a quarterly challenge, which was the thing that I mentioned. And each quarterly challenge can be different. Sometimes it's health-wise, sometimes it's relationship. It could be any type of quarterly challenge. I also have within my quarterly planning, I want to delegate stuff away from myself. I'm always trying to delegate. I have systems and processes that I work on every quarter, professional development and personal development that I'm doing for the quarter, any centers of influence that I'm working on. And that's usually related to my three focuses for the quarter, and then the real estate strategy focus, that I'm thinking about. And then I want to make sure that I'm working on the 4 freedoms that I call it, like time freedom, location freedom, thought freedom, and financial freedom. So I want to, have a little check off what I've accomplished for the quarter. And then I break that down into weekly. So every week I've got on my desk here my weekly plan, and it connects up to the quarterly plan. And so I work on those pieces every week that will help me achieve the quarterly goal. And I found that I've been able to achieve my goals a lot faster by having that set up. It works really well for me, and that's why I put it, like, I used to do coaching. I don't do it anymore. It's not a good use of my time, but I used to do a lot of coaching, and I created all these templates that I used for myself, and I just gave it to my coaching clients. And then instead of like hiding it, I put it in a book, and I made it available to anybody who wanted it. Finds the system useful for them.
Love it. Well, I've got like several questions from that. I love goals. Sure. I love goal setting, but let me ask you, I guess a couple thoughts. 2 immediately come to mind. You said that annual goals don't work for you. Tell me what that means and why.
Well, whatever happened with like annual planning usually had to do with like, the New Year's Eve, and then setting goals at New Year's Eve. And then, you set these big goals for New Year's, or at New Year's, or just after New Year's, or before, or however you do it. And then you don't look at the goals again until like November or December, really maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks, but you're not really getting those goals achieved. I found that if I stick to 90-day goals, I'm usually achieving the goals that I probably would have put down in a year in the first or second quarter. And so I'm actually achieving at a higher level than I think that I would think possible. Because, what ends up happening with big goals, especially like 10-year goals, when you put 10-year goals down, all of a sudden you're achieving things faster, because the goals that you put down, you actually can achieve them faster than you thought possible. Right. And oftentimes I'm achieving those big 10-year goals in like maybe, 8 quarters or 9 quarters, as opposed to, 40 quarters, which would be what a 10-year goal is. And so like for me, that I found that's why I don't do those annual plans. It's too far away in the future for, I think, people to be able to achieve what they set out. And having those chunks and focusing on the quarter, it's just very effective.
Yeah, I resonate with that. In fact, I was reading a book last night, and they were talking about very similar how New Year's Eve, everybody, great intentions, everyone's excited for the new year. They're kind of feeling inspired. And by the end of January, all of the goals that they had wanted to achieve, are effectively either by the wayside, or they haven't looked at them, in 30 days. And that's why most never really stick. So yeah, it's really impressive. And I like how you broke that down. It makes a lot of sense in part for what I just said. Most, they have the big plans of grandeur, but by the time it gets to a month or two or first quarter, they've kind of forgotten about them. Quentin, how often do you review, and I have a follow-up question, but how often do you review what you just said? I know it's right on your wall there, and I suspect that you see it maybe, unconsciously or subconsciously every day. And I know there's power in that, just having it visual, even though you're not paying attention. But how often do you actually review that in detail and gauge your progress?
Well, first, I have an accountability partner that I use on Monday mornings at 11. I'll review the weekly plan that I have and the priorities that I have for the week. And you got to remember, when I am writing my weekly plan, I'm looking at my quarterly goals. And so on Sunday night, when I write out my plan for the week, I'm also connecting up to see how I've achieved, or if I've achieved the quarterly goals that I set for the quarter, or what I need to do that week in order to push myself to get to those quarterly goals. Remember how I said in my quarterly goals, I have centers of influence that I'm working on? Well, that's a list of people's names that I need to connect with this quarter in order to achieve the goals that I believe I set out for the quarter. And so in my weekly plan, I'll actually have lunch with that specific person that was listed in the quarterly goal. And so that I find that's been really helpful for me. So when you say, like, when are you looking at it? I'm looking at it every week when I'm setting my plan for the week, right? And I'm connecting them together. And that's why I find that it's effective, because of that kind of connection.
Sure. And that leads me to my follow-up question, because what I find in my world is that there are, and I think I'm not unique in this, is there are so many things vying for your attention, so many things that are there to distract you. And I've learned that the highest achievers have almost a discernment, if you will, and maybe that's a strong word for it, but the ability to kind of not let some of that unnecessary or just things that get in your way of what the big picture focus is. But I think many people are guilty of getting bogged down with stuff that they should be delegating. You use that term or that word earlier, that you work on delegating more and more every day, every week, every quarter. Do you ever have, I'm certain you have things that try to get in the way of your goals, but how do you deal with when you have things that are continuously cropping up, or things that might try to throw you off what you're trying to accomplish? I assume that happens to you. It probably happens to everybody, but to me, that's one of the biggest impediments to people achieving their goals, is getting sidetracked, getting things that kind of throw them a curveball. If my question's ambiguous, tell me, but how do you deal with kind of the white noise, if you will, that gets in the way of your goals, or tries to get in the way of your goals?
So at first, what I'll do is I'll work on it. So I'll get whatever needs to get done, but I'll add it into my my plans for the next week for delegating away. I have an EA, like a personal assistant that works with me. I have several VAs that work with me as well. I'm very active on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, right? But I'm not creating that content that goes on there. I'm not posting that content that goes on there. I'm putting it, like, I am the person in the video, and I'm like creating the initial content. I'm doing the part that is that I need to be present for, and that it's going to be most effective to the audience. But I'm delegating away all of those other pieces, because it's just not a good use of my time, right? It's better for me to delegate that stuff away. And that would be some of the minutia that you're talking about, all of the things that get you bogged down. And once you figure out what it is, you have to delegate it away. And that's why I have this whole planning system. The goal achievement system is so that I can, make sure that I identify what's kind of got in my way, and make sure to delegate it, dump it, or do it if I have to do it, right?
I like it. And it goes without saying, you are militant about your planning. You stay on it, and that is why you're staying focused. I think people can lose their way when it comes to that. So let me ask another question. Have you ever heard of BHAGs? The big, very audacious goals. So do you have any I'm not asking you to share those, although I'm sure that I would love to know, but those are usually private or personal. But do you subscribe to BHAGs? And if so, how does that fit into your 10-year plan and or beyond?
Yeah, and that's what a 10-year plan is, right? It's basically BHAGs on a specific, it's very specific. So it would be like, BHAGs on physical and health attributes. There'd be BHAGs on financial. There'd be BHAGs on relationship. It could be like BHAGs on leisure time. So like, I've got 8 criterias that I look at, that I have those big goals in, and that would be part of those 10-year goals, right? And so yes, I'm an avid reader of books. like physical books. So I read 2 books a month. I also listen to audiobooks. Probably I'll finish 1 to 2 a month, depending on what I'm doing. And I listen to podcasts and video casts as well. So those are things that I'm into, and often I'll listen to those on walks when I'm going on walks. That's when I do the audio piece. But I mean, all of that, like all of those pieces help me to achieve those BHAGs, right? Because those are the personal and professional development that help me to, like, usually, remember, when I'm looking at my quarterly plan or I'm doing my quarterly plan, I'm looking again at my 10-year goals, right? So like, I'm always reminding myself what it is that I'm trying to do. And each of those quarters, I'm working towards those big, hairy, audacious goals, right? And as I go along, I'm achieving my 10-year goals a lot faster, right? Because honestly, I'm just spending time doing it, right? I'm focusing on it. Whatever you focus on is what you achieve, right? And that's what I'm doing. And it's easy to say what your goals are. It's harder to get focus on them and get it done, right? And I'm just, all I'm doing is giving it the focus it deserves.
That's fantastic. Well, one of the common traits I've seen with high achievers like yourself is continuous education. I think a lot of people get to a point where they feel that they've done well or seem to have some expertise in their career or their field and stop learning. And the ones that continue to go are the ones that are continuously personally developing. So 1 or 2 more personal questions. And again, I told you I enjoy the personal aspect, and then I've got some real estate specific questions. But I guess when do you find time to read the physical books? And then it would be question 1. And then question 2 is there a book that you would recommend that you've read recently that's had an impact on you? Or really any book, doesn't have to be recent, but if there's one book that jumped off the page that said, well, this really has an impact on my life, what would that be?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of books that I feel have impacted my life, especially as a real estate investor. The little purple book that everybody talks about is, the Rich Dad Poor Dad book is definitely one of those. But like I said, I mean, I would just say that the most recent book that I'm reading is the one that's probably affecting me the most, because that's that's the one that I'm into right now. I mean, I recently read Central Banking 101, which was a great book on how it was actually written by a Fed insider on how the Federal Open Market Committee works, and sits on the Fed desk, and kind of explained how everything is interconnected. I thought that was quite good. There's a book I'm reading right now that I'm reading currently, which is Rise of America by Marin Katusa, which is a great book on how the money system works, talking about commodities, talking about different physical assets and what that will do over time. So, when do I read? I read for leisure. So I read in the evening, and I read in the morning for focus. So I read a lot less in the morning than I do in the evenings. So I'll spend an hour in the evening reading. On the weekend, that's what I'll do is instead of watching TV, I'll read a book, right? And for me, that's leisure. I enjoy it, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. And whereas turning on the TV is so easy and you get sucked in, and next thing you know, you're binging on Netflix. And I'm not that I'm guilty of that, but maybe once or twice. So one more personal question, morning routines. There was a book written by Tim Ferriss a few years ago. I think it was something about Titans, Tools of Titans, something to that effect. But it was kind of just personal habits of high achievers. And for me, having a morning routine, kind of priming the pump, getting your mindset ready. I'm always intrigued by people that if in fact they have morning routine. So my question is, do you have a morning routine that you subscribe to? And if so, would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, so usually I'll wake up early, like 6:15, 6:30. I'll exercise, I used to go for a run. Now my knees are a little it's a little bit more painful for me, but I'll do like a nice power walk for about an hour in the morning. I'll do a little bit of reading and kind of chill out for a little while. My kids actually this year have a later start time in school, but usually I'll spend some time with them before they go to school, just kind of figuring out how things are going, what's going on before they leave. And then I'll have a meeting with my EA, usually at the off the top. These are the action items that I need done today, and these are the things that. And if it's at the beginning of the week, these are like the main things that I'm working on this week, right? And that's kind of the start of my day. I have different times that I focus on meetings, so I'll talk to potential investors in my projects at different times. I'll talk to I'll have different meetings with people depending on what projects are going on the asset management side. So it just depends. But in the morning, that's the core, is getting the exercise in, a little bit of reading, a little bit of conversation with the family, and then right into a meeting with my EA.
Love it, love it, love it. So let me switch gears. Let me discuss some of the real estate strategy. So it sounds like you're focused a lot on the multis at this point, and obviously putting some significant numbers under management. But the Burr Method, buy, rent, rehab, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, has become kind of a popular way of going about investing, and for obvious reasons. One of the things in our world is we buy and sell, and we've some certain ways that we do that, but we have to recreate that every month. And of course, that's the nature of a sales business, and we love it, and we enjoy it, and we've had a lot of success with it. But at some point, most people don't want to have to get up and recreate that. And so the benefit of long-term wealth building, comes in the form of some of these, in our case, I guess I'd say single family homes, but I know you wrote a book on this. And so for those that are kind of novices, aren't familiar with this process or program, can you kind of explain it? And obviously the point, you wrote a book about it. I know it was started back in when you first started, and you had one, you sold and started accumulating. And I do find people will ultimately grow into multis as they learn this method more. But can you explain the Burr Method a little bit, and how it's applied to your life? You obviously became an expert at it, and any sort of insight that you might want to share with someone that's looking to get started with a similar method.
Yeah, I have a ton of insights I could share. Like, that book is the Ultimate Wealth Strategy book. It was actually written before the acronym Burr was kind of canonized by Bigger Pockets. So it was, but people have been using this strategy for decades, right? It's not something new, right? You can go, if there's a Nicholas Nickleby book from way back when, I think it's something like that. It was written in the 60s and basically explained the same strategy. You're taking a property that perhaps needs some work, needs some repositioning. You're looking at its highest and best use. Hopefully you're taking something you're buying something that has a little bit of equity in it, or that you're buying something that you can add a basement suite to, do an addition to, add another unit to, in order to create value. Through those renovations, which is the other R, is where that value is created. When you're buying the property, you're looking to ensure that the after repair value that you are, what you're going to create through the renovations, it's going to create a lot of value, so that you can refinance out your initial down payment, your renovation, whatever renovations that you put in it, so that you can own the property and pull out all your investment. And that's that refinance piece. Sometimes you do it and it's all down payment, all your renovation costs, and you've got an infinite return on the asset. Other times you may have pulled out just your renovation costs and a little bit of your down payment. It just depends. But the key is, when you get to your after repair value, you need to have cash flow that comes from that asset at the after repair value amount. It's not just about pulling your money out. It's about creating a cash flowing asset that continues to pay you again and again. And that for me is the key to all of this. And then you go and you do it again, right? And you do it again. And that was great for the 1 to 4 unit properties for me. I did that. I don't know how many properties, like I have 50, 60, I can't remember. I've sold off a lot of the smaller, like 1, 2 unit properties that I have. Because what I found was that those were great for creating cash flow, but they weren't as good as apartment buildings for creating wealth. After you've achieved your financial freedom from the 1 to 4 unit properties, there's great income that comes from it. But if you're thinking about wealth, it comes from doing the same thing on larger apartment buildings. So instead of making $80,000, $100,000 after a refi and having the property and creating cash flow, let's say I'll give you an example. I bought a 12 unit building for 1.75 million. It was, I have a VTB on it, vendor take back seller financing, for 1.3 million. My partner brings in 500,000, which includes some of the holding costs and rental costs of that building. 3 years later, we've been able to, we are going to refinance that. We're in the process of refinancing. I just got it appraised for 2.65 million. So, instead of doing like the smaller 1 to 4 unit properties where we lift the value by 150, 100,000, now we're talking about lifting it by $1 million, right? We're doing the same thing. Like, the partner is going to get his $500,000 back plus an additional 75K. I'll get my 75K from it. Now he owns it 50%. I still own it 50%. Infinite returns for both of us. He's reinvesting that into a 24 unit building now. And so, like, it's the same process, takes longer, but the numbers are a lot bigger. Right. And that's why I like, doing what I've done before in a much bigger asset. And, I'm taking that now and doing it on scale on many assets. So instead of just doing like that 12 unit, we have 202 units across 7 buildings that we're doing the same thing that we acquired. So it's just taking what we've done before in those 1 to 4 and scaling it and then scaling it again. Right. And I'm not special. Like, I was a teacher. I'm not just like, it's not some sort of magic. I'm just focused and I do what I say I'm going to do. I have a good reputation and that's the key. Right. But anybody can do this. Right. One of the things I did want to share is like, I'm sharing a little bit of that journey. I started a podcast earlier too called Get Real Wealthy. And I'm trying to share a little bit about, some of the different things that I've done, across different assets. But I also like, I kind of reflect back on where I started and where I am now and what I would have done differently. And I think, the quicker that I could have gotten out of the 1 to 4 unit properties and into the larger buildings, the greater wealth I would have created. And the sooner I actually would have been out of the, the rat race, if you could, the Robert Kiyosaki term, right? But it's just, it's some reflection on what I've done at this point, right?
Sure. Well, and I guess I hear you, and obviously hindsight is 2020 for all of us. But would you say that obviously some of your growth occurred when you were starting small and kind of gradually working up? Could, in hindsight, it seems like you could have expedited that maybe and jumped into things a little quicker, but your journey would have been obviously different. And so for people starting out, and I've got, I guess, 2 questions in here. Question 1 is specific, which is, is there a cash flow amount on a a one unit, let's just say a single family residence, that you would strive for in the Burr method at the end of the day? What would that number be? And then I guess second to that is that folks that want to get started in this, obviously the lower barrier to entry would be single family homes. And of course you can then get dupes and tries and quads and so on and so forth, and ultimately become, and the difference in the wealth is obviously, several zeros at the end of the day. So cash flow would be my first question on a per property unit. And those that want to achieve wealth, would you advise the same path that you took? I mean, it's the natural progression, or so it would seem, but what would you advise if someone wanted to emulate your success and what you've done, but maybe have a shorter path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, some of the things that I did, I would have probably skipped. I would have skipped doing like lease to owns and rent to owns. I would have skipped wholesaling properties. I would have skipped flipping properties. I would have skipped all of that. When I quit my job in 2014, I was getting about $5,000 a month in cash flow from my assets. That was my financial freedom number. So I would say that, figure out how you can get to your financial freedom number as quickly as you can from the cash flow from those assets. And then once you've done that, move up into larger buildings as quickly as you can. It's always going to depend on the area that you're in when it comes to what cash flow makes sense, and like at different time periods. So when I was starting back in 2008, I could buy, something that was 100% financed, because you could in 2008, a rental property, and I would make maybe about $100 in cash flow on that. And at the time I thought, wow, that's not a lot. But then take that same property and own it for 5 years or own it for 10 years and have rental increases that keep happening. And you got to remember, my market is tough. Like, I'm in a fully rent controlled market in Ontario, Canada. It's like worse than California when it comes to rent control. So it is tough. But what happens in that market is that rents don't go down. They've never gone down since the 70s because it's rent controlled. But when we have a turnover, you can re-rent it to market rent. And then all of a sudden that property that was $100 a month cash flow moves to like $600 a month. I've got like a triplex that cash flows almost $2,000 a month just by itself now. Right. And I bought that back in, I want to say I bought that in like 2012 or 2013. Right. And at the time it may have cash flowed $400 a month, something like that. So, what I would suggest is find something that after repairs, maintenance, vacancy, all your hard costs, it cash flows a couple $100 a month. It doesn't have to be like 500 or 1,000 or anything like that. Make it a couple hundred. As long as you have the ability to continue to own that asset for the long term, it's a market where you're going to see continual increases in rent. You're seeing population come to that area. There's a lot of southern states I would have loved to invest in 10 years ago, and I would still invest in today, right? Where you have the population kind of coming in. There are a lot of different places, not only in the South, but different places around the US that I would love to invest in, because you see population coming in, you see job diversity, you see like governments, both at the federal and local level, that are investing in the area. You see bridges being constructed. You see, towns and cities going out to find businesses to come in. All of that stuff is great for the future fundamentals of the area. And I would be okay with $100 in cash flow in that market, because I know that a couple years down the road, there's going to be a lot more cash flow. I've been buying in Tampa. So I've got a few rental properties in Tampa. And, when I started buying down there, it was like the 1% rule. Okay. So like, that rule where you're buying it for 100,000 and you rent $1,000 a month. That's the 1% rule, 1% of the value of it. And now though, the cash flow that's coming from that asset is a lot higher. And it's only because the rents have been going up and people have been moving to the area and they cannot find rentals, right? And it's because of the fundamentals of the area, not the reason that I bought it for 1%. It's because of the fundamentals of the area. I don't suggest you follow like a rule, because it sounds good. Like 1% sounds good, but the fact that property is done well isn't because of the 1%. It's because the fundamentals that work in real estate are in that particular market. And there are lots of other markets around the US that follow that model too.
And it kind of was part of my next question, is that I think the natural is that you have to be able to touch the property and see it and be able to visit it. And certainly not that COVID, created this virtual world, but I think it certainly expedited. There's so much virtual today. In fact, I think it's more the norm than the exception at this point. So for folks that are looking to start, would you recommend that they start in their backyard, or does it not matter? Would you look at, even for someone taking their first step, would you advise that they go somewhere? I mean, you're up in Canada, it's down in Tampa. I mean, it's almost as far as it could get, in North America. So clearly that's not an issue for you, but starting out, would you advise the same?
Well, what I would do is, if I was to start out in an area that I don't know, like what's going on, I would go to like local meetups and see, what are people investing in the area? Like what is making sense right now? I'd be listening to podcasts like this. I'd be, doing my due diligence by, finding out who's investing where and what type of assets are they investing in and what makes the most sense in a given area. Because in some areas, it doesn't make sense to have a long-term rental, but it makes more sense to flip projects, right? Just because that's what the area is and that's what people are doing and what makes the most sense. So then you take the funds that you're flipping and you flip them into longer-term assets in areas that make more sense. So I would say that, yes, stick to the area that you're in, around where you're in at the beginning, but it doesn't mean that the strategy is the one that you're going to want to stick with, right? It just, you have to, figure that out, what makes the most sense in the area. And it is the easiest. But what happens when you end up focusing on the area that you're in, you actually take like real estate investing as a job rather than a business. And that's something you have to watch out for. If you turn real estate investing into a job, like you're self-employed, then you end up working on your flips, or you end up being the property manager in the rental property. And that isn't going to help you to scale, and it's not going to help you to grow. When you're looking at cash flow, you also want to include property management fees into that cash flow statement. And then the cash flow is what you calculate after all of that, because that's something that can really bog you down. Now, it's okay for your first property to do that, just so you understand how to manage properties. But there's a lot to property management that you don't want to do, and it will turn you off of investing, right? So
it can do that very quickly. Yes.
Yeah, but you just have to remember that the commodity that you have are rental properties. Okay. The business is, above that, right? And the commodity behind it is rental properties. You don't want to treat it as a hobby, and you don't want to be self-employed in that. So the key to being able to do that is to see it as a business and treat it as a business, and make sure that you have systems and processes that kind of move you out of that a little bit, right?
That's great advice. In fact, I was interviewing somebody not too long ago, and it ties into my last question for you here in just a second. But I think it was, what advice would you have given your 25-year-old self? And his was very similar. It was pay to have some of that stuff done for you, because it'll bog your growth down at the end of the day. And you see, at least where I sit, and I suspect you as well, you see a lot of people that they want to save that money. They don't want to pay that property manager. And so, there's no reason they can't do it themselves. And next thing you know, they're married to a problem. They're the ones getting the phone calls and things that can turn you sideways very quickly. So that's very sound advice. Make sure you're factoring in your property management fees so you can be work on the business and not in the business. And I think that's a huge takeaway. Certainly connects big time with me. So, well, my final question is kind of along those same lines, but again, my curiosity and I guess how people, what makes them tick, life lessons they've learned. And so as you reflect back on your life, it's not so much a failure or mistake or life lesson, but kind of in that same vein, if there was a failure, a mistake, one lesson that has been maybe an overarching theme of your life, it's kind of an open and hopefully not too ambiguous of a question, but just almost personal advice. What when I am asking this question, what kind of stands out in your life? Something that either a mistake that you had this major lesson that you learned from that you now live your life by, or a piece of advice that you got, or maybe just your outlook on life. And may I ask that question?
Absolutely. And my answer is I don't make mistakes. I have
Love it.
I have learning opportunities. That's what I have, right? I've never made a mistake in my life. I've only had things that I've learned from. And that's the key for me. Like I've always want to learn. I wish I did things differently, but I've always learned from those things. I've had, fires, and I've had, places burned down. I've built a house from scratch, because I thought that it was the best opportunity for me to learn, but it wasn't really a good use of my time, right? And I spent way too much time doing those things instead of focusing on some of the bigger picture items that would have gotten me to my goals faster, because I decided to do something that wasn't what I should have been focusing on. And I probably should have talked to other people who had already achieved the goals that I wanted to achieve, to find out what it is they weren't doing, not what it is that they were doing. And so, if I were to impart something to you, is find somebody who's achieved the goals that you want to achieve. And that's really hard in like this social media environment, because everybody looks like they're successful because they they have pictures of Lamborghinis and on a yacht. It reminds me of those like Tom Vu commercials way back in the 80s, right? You too can be, no, right? But the thing is, find somebody who's actually achieved what you want to achieve, and find out what they're not doing, not what they're doing. Because if you can find out what they're not doing and you can emulate that, the other part of what they're doing is, you can see that, like they're buying apartment buildings. Okay, but what are they not doing in order to buy those apartment buildings? Those are the pieces that will help you to get where you want to go faster.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the things that we try to do here, is have our to-do list and our not to-do list. And sometimes not to-do list is more important. And then when you talked about building the house, if you quantified your time and put a value on the hourly, it sounds like it wasn't worth it wasn't worth the investment.
It was like $20 an hour or whatever it was, right? It wasn't, and when I was charging for coaching, I would charge coaching at $500 an hour. Right. I mean, like, it didn't make any sense. So, it's just one of those things. Like, it's part of learning and part of life. Right. And I don't regret it at all.
Part of the process. Well, I've had several takeaways, but I think one that jumps out for me the most is, and use the word focused. And I think that's very, very accurate. Very impressive, obviously, your success, and congratulations on all of it, by the way. But what's impressive to me is your ability to know the game plan that you want to achieve, have it set out for you in blocks that go out 10 years, and then have the ability to stay focused on that in the midst of all the distractions life can throw at you, including social media. You stay focused on that. And I find that to be an attribute that not everybody possesses. And so for me, as I take away things from this conversation, the focus is really impressive to me. And so there's certainly be some changes to how I execute, implement my goals as well, based on this conversation. So thank you for sharing that. That was really powerful.
Oh, no problem at all.
Wonderful.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you have a takeaway. So that's
absolutely
great.
Well, and I would say that I know that our listeners are going to enjoy this as well. And again, we try to cover a lot of topics, not just real estate, but mindset and motivation and goals and morning routines and things that are kind of behind the outward success. And so, Quentin, you've been a wealth of knowledge, and thank you for being so open and sharing. And so I want to give a big thank you for your time and for everything that you shared. And again, congratulations on your success. I know that you're not coaching anymore, but you've got books out there, and if there were folks that wanted to reach out to you, wanted to learn more from you, how do they get in touch with you, or what would you recommend they do? Where can they get your books, and what's the best way to try to follow you?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to getrealwealthy.com and you check out the podcast, that's an easy way. I've got a YouTube video thing that I just started. Also, my books are all available on Amazon. If you go to put in Quentin D'Souza there, you'll get me. And if you want a free chapter of the Action Taker Real Estate Planner, just go to actiontakerrealestateplanner.com and you can get chapter 1 of that planning guide to help you achieve your goals. And my hope is that you take something away from this video like you did, and you go and you apply it to your life, because it's only through action that you'll achieve your goals. It's not through listening, and it's not through reading. It's through action. So take something from here and apply it to your life, and that 1% improvement is going to be exponential to the goals that you achieve in the future.
Very good. Very good. Well, Quentin, thank you again. Greatly appreciate the time. And for all the listeners, guys, thank you for tuning in, listening in wherever you are. It's been another episode of the Real Estate Investors Money Matrix podcast. We hope to see you guys again very soon. Quentin, thank you again.
I see you've been watching our videos, and I want to give you a big thank you. If you've ever wanted to get into real estate investing, there's never been a better time than now. Click the link below for more information on how you can work with myself and my team, or visit pinkaffiliates.com. That's pinkaffiliates.com. We have a variety of options for you to get started at whatever level you are interested in. Click the link below, visit pinkaffiliates.com, and see what Pink can do for you.